Are you ready to try your hand at placing your very first stock trade? Then check out our free guide, 10 Steps to Choosing Your First Stock to Trade, the Ultimate Beginner's Guide. In this free download, you'll learn how to choose the right kinds of stocks and how to find them, know when to buy your stocks and when to sell them, and you'll learn how to take your very first steps to becoming a stock trader and much more. Grab your free guide now by going to TRADEway.com/guide. That's TRADEway.com/guide. Hey guys, I'm David Mitchell, founder and CEO of TRADEway. What if God Himself gave you a blueprint for how to handle your money? Well, the Bible is a practical book. Let's dive in and see what it has to say about wealth, about risk, about leverage, and about investing, and uncover how trading in the stock market can be a powerful tool for moving towards your biggest goals. We're so happy you're here. This is The Word on Investing.
Hey guys, and welcome back to The Word on Investing. This is Ben Mitchell with you once again, filling in for my dad, our usual host, David Mitchell. And we're going to be picking up right where we left off last time. I left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger. And of course, I wanted to give you guys as much of a foundation as possible before moving into essentially this topic and how it is affecting us today. So in our last episode, we introduced the concept of dollarization and how it got us to where we are today. Now, here we are talking about the problem of de-dollarization. If it wasn't clear enough in the last episode, the concept of dollarization is actually a pretty good thing for us as U.S. citizens, because what it does is it increases our dominance. It increases the dominance of the currency that we rely on and that we work so hard for. So it's not necessarily a problem for us when countries start to dollarize. Of course, it happened on a global scale, as we said in 1944, and it happens even to this day among emerging markets, developing countries and things of that sort. However, we also, at the end of the last episode, introduced a new problem, something that actually does affect us in a negative way as U.S. citizens, and that's the idea of de-dollarization. So we're going to pick up again right where we left off, and I want to ask you guys a question. Why do you think countries, especially some of the ones that are already deemed global superpowers, China, Russia, why would these countries be wanting to de-dollarize in the first place? Well, for starters, let's consider the debt problem that we are all, as U.S. citizens, well too familiar with. And think about the fact that going all the way back to, the 1960s, maybe even prior to that, there has only been a solitary year where our debt was actually reduced below zero. In other words, the percentage of our debt was actually in the negative and not growing. Now, obviously, there have been years where the growth of our debt has been happening at a slower pace than others. In 2019, for example, our debt growth was at a much slower pace than the following year when the pandemic hit, and our debt just blew, through the roof yet again. So again, going all the way back to the 60s and even prior to that, there's only been one year, and that was the year 2000, the final year of the Clinton administration, where our debt was actually in the negative. And all the years prior to that and all the years following that year, again, between 1960 roughly and 1999, and then from 2001 all the way to present day, our debt has been increasing, in some cases on exponential levels. So obviously that's a problem. All of the countries around the world, not only our allies, but even those who have motives to, again, move away and de-Americanize, as they put it, the financial system around the world, they see this too. And certainly our creditors see it. Going all the way back, again, guys, this is stuff I've been talking about with my students as early as 2017, and I was doing a lot of research prior to that even. You go all the way back to March 26th, 2009, a UN panel of expert economists called for a new global currency reserve scheme to replace the U.S. dollar-based system. And at that time, some, including China, go figure, had already suggested that the dollar be dumped as the world currency. That was based on an ABC News article back in 2016. And it was talking about developments in this particular area happening years even prior to that. So again, guys, this isn't anything new. It's just a matter of all of a sudden it's starting to come to fruition in a way that is concerning, in my opinion, and I believe concerning to a lot of U.S. citizens at this point. But we can fast forward a little bit and see this theme continue all the way up to 2018. More recently than the 2009 occurrence that I was just referencing, Even some of our allies have discussed moving away from the dollar. Consider Germany for a second. Obviously, that would be otherwise known as a pretty loyal ally of the U.S. Back in 2018, though, for the first time, they started voicing concerns, and these voices started growing louder and louder in favor of a more self-reliant scheme in order to, again, move away from the dollar and have more dominance within their own currency. Beef up their self-confidence in matters of international currency, having a little bit more autonomy in that particular area. This is the kind of stuff they started talking about at that time. This is what the German foreign minister wrote in a guest article back in autumn of 2018. He said, "It is therefore essential that we strengthen European autonomy by establishing payment channels independent of the U.S., creating a European monetary fund, and building an independent SWIFT system," end quote. And again, that was based on an article published by the German foreign minister at that time. Now, criticism of the dollar, and the dollar being, again, the dominant currency, having somewhat of a monopoly within the international monetary system, it started becoming a really big part of the platform of EU leaders as well. And if you fast forward just a little bit, it's the same year, 2018, fast forward just a little bit, in his speech on the State of the Union in 2018, the EU Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker, he said, quote, "It is absurd that Europe pays for 80% of its energy import bill, worth 300 billion euro a year, in US dollars when only roughly 2% of our energy imports come from the United States. It is absurd that European companies buy European planes in dollars instead of euro. The euro must become the face and instrument of a new, more sovereign Europe." Again, guys, we've been talking about it for a long time. The idea of de-dollarization and the emphasis that a lot of countries, including our very allies, have been putting on it is nothing new. However, it may seem new to us now because all of a sudden things are starting to happen. So what are the ramifications so far of things that are happening and the whole deal that we talked about in our last episode between China and Brazil? Remember, that happened on March 29th of this year, 2023. That whole deal, all of the conversations happening between the BRICS nations, our own allies out there, this has been happening for a long time, and all of a sudden it's starting to really make the rounds as to how it's going to affect us. What are the ramifications so far of what has taken place? Well, number one, I want to point out that Americans obviously have not yet fully realized exactly what has taken place. In other words, on March 29th, when this deal was struck, where was the breaking news? Who was talking about it? Well, I can tell you that outlets that everyday Americans would be listening to were not the ones talking about it. You had to, skim through pretty obscure news articles. You had to be, of course, very in tune with what's happening in the metals space, because a lot of people in that realm, of course, are talking about things like this all the time. People were not hearing about it. Again, everyday Americans were not hearing about it the way that they should have been hearing about it. So Americans have not fully realized what exactly has even happened. The ramifications so far are that the BRICS nations are one step closer to full de-dollarization. Remember, we defined that in the last episode. It's replacing the dollar with something else in all of the most important areas within the international monetary system. But here at home, there's yet to be a manifestation of these developments. In other words, obviously, we're still using our dollars at this very moment. Again, a lot of everyday Americans don't even know what took place on March 29th of this year. And so the full manifestation of this has not happened yet. Again, I believe it was the first domino to fall in many more that will need to fall prior to something more drastic happening. So now the question is, where is it going from here? Well, number one, central banks are going to continue to increase their official gold reserves. One of the primary reasons for concern, in my opinion, is the threat that China's currency, what it has on the US dollar, and its role as a monetary leader in the global economy, is that these central banks around the world, Russia, China, India, so many others, have been drastically increasing their official gold reserves for years. Again, this isn't something new. This is something that has been in consideration for a long time. And these foreign nations have been slowly, diligently, and meticulously planning for these types of developments. One of the biggest ways that they've been able to prepare for this moment is by increasing their official gold reserves. Now, I believe that a global de-dollarization is already kind of upon us, if you will, with the growing reluctance by non-Western nations to use the dollar in the first place. Remember, many central banks have already sought alternatives to the primary reserve currency, of course, that being the dollar, and gold is the ideal choice given its history with the United States dollar itself. So last year, for example, global central banks bought the most gold on record at a whopping 1,140 some odd tons, valued at some $70 billion, according to the World Gold Council. So the stockpiling of gold has continued at a record pace so far here in 2023, with the banks adding another 125 tons during just the first couple of months of the year. Now, what's interesting about that, guys, is that a lot of analysts believe that a large portion of China's purchases of gold remain unreported. So we know that they're increasing their gold reserves, again, their quote-unquote official gold reserves. We have some data to back that up, to see the steady, gradual growth over the last several decades. However, a lot of analysts, again, believe that a lot of it is unreported. And therefore, the country is this kind of quote-unquote mystery buyer, stockpiling even more gold than we can even know, than we could even perhaps comprehend in recent years. And why are they doing it? It's to minimize their exposure to the U.S. dollar. One of the greatest benefits and leverages that the U.S. dollar had back in 1944, I'm going back to our last episode for just a second. Remember the Bretton Woods Agreement. What gave them their leverage and what made the dollar a superpower of a currency in the first place is because we were able to back it up with gold. We were still on a gold standard to some degree at that time. So all of these countries know that when the time comes for an international restructuring of the monetary system, that everyone that comes to the table will need some gold, something physical, something tangible that all humans around the entire world will find valuable, desirable, and something that can, again, act as a medium to help replace the current order. That's gold. They're stockpiling it. They are increasing their reserves as much as possible so that when they come to the table, they have the biggest voice. A lot of China's gold is believed to be underreported, therefore kind of implying that they are most likely going to be the loudest voice at the table if and when that time comes. Central banks will continue buying gold as a part of their diversification strategy to fix this problem. Let me give you a potent example, and if you want to go back like a year into our episode archives, you can actually find an episode I did called The Power of Gold in the 21st Century, and I actually talked about this as it was happening in real time. Now, funny side note, if you guys do go back and re-listen to that episode or listen to it for the first time, I was going so fast, covering so much material, that I mistakenly referred to the Russian-Ukraine war as the Russian-Korean war, and that was my mistake. So if you go listen to that, I was not referencing some mystery war that you guys had never heard of. No, it was Russia invading the Ukraine that I was referencing. So that's just a note for if you go listen to that. But let's rewind for a second. If you go back to 2009, Russia's gold reserves were about 600 tons. Okay? Now, by the time the sanctions were imposed on them in 2022, which is when the invasion happened, which is when the United States started imposing those sanctions, Russia's gold reserves had increased from 600 tons to close to 3,000 tons by that point. They had spent the last 13 years in between 2009 and 2022, they spent that entire period acquiring 2,400 metric tons of gold. Listen, guys, that is no easy task, even for a superpower of a government, because they are purchasing that gold. Where are they acquiring the gold? Well, some of it may be mining domestically, but a lot of it is purchasing off of the open market. In fact, I would say even what they are mining domestically is going to be purchased off of their market system. And so they are having to, again, diligently, slowly over time, purchase and acquire the gold and accumulate that over time in order to have the type of leverage they had by the time the sanctions were imposed in 2022. If you want to know what happened and how they were able to utilize that gold they had been acquiring up to that point, again, go back and listen to that episode that I recorded last year. So again, the question is, where exactly are we going from here? What are some other dominoes that could potentially fall following what happened with the deal between China and Brazil? Again, we talked about that in the last episode. Well, first of all, the United States is going to continue to be its own worst enemy. It's going to continue to undermine its currency's value. We've been seeing this time and time again. And the more they do it, think about the debt ceiling deal that was just passed. We are not doing ourselves any favor in terms of our own money's value, long-term or short-term. And so this is going to continue to be a problem. The U.S. will continue to be its own worst enemy. Now, over time, as that continues to unfold, more foreign nations will continue to de-dollarize, potentially leading to, and listen, guys, again, I don't want to sound alarmist. I'm not trying to induce fear. I'm not trying to sound crazy. But one possibility, and this is why I use the word potentially, is that a result of all this could be hyperinflation. Now, perhaps not. Certainly don't have a crystal ball. It's not the only possibility, but it is a real possibility. If the world, if our allies, if all of the leading nations around the globe start de-dollarizing and moving away from the dollar, we currently have enough U.S. dollars in circulation to support the world, but if the world doesn't want it, there's too much of it and hyperinflation could occur. It has happened to countries all throughout history. In ancient times, all the way up to present day, there are currently countries that are experiencing hyperinflation as we speak. And so that's something that we need to at least factor in. Again, it's not a guarantee. I'm not trying to be alarmist. I want you guys to have all the information that you possibly can have so that you can factor those components into your decision-making for the benefit of you and your family. That's it. That's my only goal. Now, U.S. financial sanctions, going back to this problem of us being our own worst enemy to some degree, they didn't have a material impact on Russia. And that's because Russia was prepared for it. Because they were prepared for it, they did not have to change any of their behavior in regard to Ukraine, their invasion that they were enacting at that time. They didn't have to change any of their goals or any of their behavior, at least at that point. Obviously, we know a lot has happened since February of 2022. But at the time the sanctions were first imposed, they were prepared for it, and they were ready for it. The U.S. would end up suffering more from its own sanctions than Russia because adversaries and neutral countries would create alternative payment platforms that did not use dollars. And remember, Russia was already prepared anyway because of the official gold holdings they had been accumulating for years leading up to that anyway. What we ended up doing is contributing further to the dollar losing its value and losing its appeal throughout the world. The sanctions ended up hurting us more than it hurt our enemies that we were targeting. And we've been hurting it through other misguided policies as well. The U.S. is doing more to destroy the dollar than our enemies could ever imagine being able to do. But they don't care because they are going to benefit from it in the long term regardless. And again, if it sounds a little bit crazy, just consider the complexity behind what Brazil and China just pulled off at the beginning in the first quarter of this year. It is a huge, massive step forward in many other countries. The BRICS nations will probably be the first to do it. That's just my personal opinion. But many other countries are thinking about it already anyway. And think about the impact of countries like Saudi Arabia and Mexico, who are currently thinking about de-dollarizing as well. These are some of our top trade partners. It's going to be interesting. And again, I believe it is one of many dominoes to fall. We want to start preparing for what could potentially happen now rather than waiting further down the road to see, how it may play out and what other crazy things may end up happening before we're like, oh, I guess we probably should go out and determine how we should protect our family, how we should protect our money, the money we've been working hard for our entire lives. Let's start thinking about that right now rather than waiting for more really crazy things to happen that carry tremendous implications with them. So if you guys want to learn more about how I believe gold and silver can be the answer to preserving the purchasing power of even just a portion of your family's money, the part of your legacy that is your monetary power, your leverage in money, check out TRADEway.com. You can even email us at support@TRADEway.com, and we will tell you many ways that you can engage with our precious metals community here at TRADEway. You can take part in our comprehensive online education all about precious metals investing, how to do it the right way, how to buy it, how pricing works, how to get the most metal for your dollars. We want to help you guys save as much money as we possibly can because it's a really weird industry and you can end up overpaying for something that you could otherwise get great prices for. It's just a matter of knowing, again, how prices work, where to find them, and how to ultimately strategize in accumulating gold and silver over time, again, for the benefit of you and your family, protecting your purchasing power against the possible implications of all these things we've been talking about. De-dollarization is absolutely a real problem. We don't yet know exactly all the ways it can manifest itself or how it will in time. But right now, we are on a fast track to seeing exactly how other countries are going to be moving away from the dollar, and we're constantly giving them more reason to do so. We're not helping ourselves in any way, that being on a national scale, but on an individual level, we can be doing things right now to offset the possibilities, again, for us and our families. So check out TRADEway.com or email us at support@TRADEway.com to find out more about our precious metals education. And we would love to share that with you guys and help further this discussion and get into it more and how it could help out you and your family. If you guys have been enjoying this episode, please rate and review it and share it with your friends and other like-minded folks so that they can start engaging with this material just as you guys have been doing today. We really appreciate it, and of course, always look forward to having you guys back on the next episode. So y'all have a good one. Until next time, happy trading.